Michael, would you like to say a few quick words about yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm the CEO of Today, the AI sales assistant for financial advice. Prior to that, I was a founding member for 7.5 years, building and scaling Clark, the insurtech unicorn out of Germany, and very happy to be here.
Artem, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Artem. I'm CTO at Today. I'm a serial startup entrepreneur, as I call myself. Previously, I was CTO and co-founder at Beedly and also CEO and co-founder at Datamin. And in general, I have almost 20 years of startup experience. So happy to be here.
I'm your host, Rathwan, author of the book Data Impact. Welcome to Slasog, Leaders or Readers. Here I speak with outstanding operators and seminal thinkers to unpack first principle system rethink for data-driven value creation. Hi, Michael and Artem. Welcome to Slasog, Leaders or Readers. In our second episode, we spoke with Marco Adelt and Daniel Glarman about the big challenges that the German insurance sector is facing, in particular about 500 million insurance contracts and how the number of insurance agents and financial advisors is shrinking due to demographics. And so to dive deeper and also to kind of unpack how you see the problem and how you want to work and solve the problem, I'm really happy you're here. And I love to start out with a provocative question. So what's your fundamental disagreement with the status quo and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Tavan, for having us. And let's maybe set the scene, right? I would say it's fairly uncontroversial to say that Western Social Security, which insurance kind of, I see always insurance filling the gap, what Social Security of the government can't do, right, is under pressure. I think there are many governments who have pretty high debt to GDP ratios already and lots of pension obligations, low Social Security obligations that kind of are sometimes, not super sustainable the way they are designed. And I think we're seeing the first cracks right now when it comes to care insurance, when it comes to other, let's say, more unpopular topics people don't want to really think about. And when you then look at Germany as an insurance market as well, you basically also see that the insurance advisor is the second least respected occupation in the market. And then you say on the one side, we have a huge problem. People don't really care about or think about insurance, pension, and investing enough. And then at the other side, the solution, people who you really can trust, who really take care, who holistically help you actually do things and execute and improve your personal finances are not getting the, I believe, respect they deserve. And that's where we're trying to see, okay, what is actually a lever we can pull. And Today, we are trying to free those advisors from admin tasks so they have more face time with clients and can build deeper relationships. Because my second fundamental disagreement is that there's many topics in personal finance that are very hot right now. There is credits, there is stock gambling or option trading. But this is also like not solving holistically what is really important. There's also care insurance. There's also health insurance where you think about which system I should be in. And this is basically not talked enough about. And therefore, I believe that, one of the core disagreements I have is that the human advisor is fundamentally undervalued.
Yeah, no, that sounds very convincing. And let's move on to the next question, which is sort of focused on your life story and your origin story. So I know that, Michael, you were the first employee at Clark, and you sort of scaled Clark as an insurtech. I mean, you saw the journey from pitch deck all the way to unicorn. And we were chatting once, and you said, the venture space is brutal, and very few companies kind of succeed. But what you recognized was that very few companies are left standing, and I think Clark is really one of the very few insurtechs in Europe, and I would say even in the world, right? That's kind of managed this journey, and so it would be fascinating if you could kind of riff on that and unpack your learnings. And Artem, you've been at Billy, and so you and prior to that, you saw a whole bunch of startups and scale-ups in Europe. And so it'd be great, if you guys could kind of give your origin story and sort of unpack how that journey has shaped your understanding of the market.
Yes, Artem, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do. So the thing is, as you correctly said, Ritavan, I was at Beely, I was CTO and one of the co-founders for almost 5 years there. And we, of course, as by now, by later company, as factoring company, we worked a lot with small businesses. Plus, prior to that, I was also with Funding Circle, where we also worked with small businesses in financing their financial needs. And if you look at Funding Circle, that's a good example because the company was born right after the start of the global financial crisis. And it was born in the UK, where it started to be really hard for small and medium-sized businesses to get access to the cash because big banks started to increase the complexity of their risk checks and in general the complexity of how the smaller businesses could have gotten access to the cash. And that's why such startups as Funding Circle, they started to be vital for the global economy because they changed the game. They brought lots of new technologies. They brought a new approach how companies could have gotten access to the cash to finance their financial needs. And that's what we also did at Beely. Starting 2017, we started to open up new channels specifically for small and medium-sized businesses, how they could increase their cash flow, how they could improve, let's say, and scale their businesses. And all of that initiatives, they were coming from us, from startups. And this is exactly how it connects to the story of today. And this is also how it connects to the story of Clark that Michael will talk about. In addition to that, I wanted to add one small thing. I personally was born and raised in a small city of miners, and I also spent tons of time in a village where my grandmother was living. And this means that all my childhood I was surrounded by these people who were farmers, miners, other workers on factories, and so on. And when I look at the current situation and what Michael just described, if the pension system will blow up, these people will be the first ones who are not ready for that, and these people will be the first ones to hit by that because they are not into investments. They are mostly not into such things as blockchain, as AI and stuff like that. They are far from these technologies. They are hardworking people who are working hard, and when it's a time for them to retire, if the pension system blows up, these people will not be ready and they will be hit really hard. And that's why it's on us, it's on our mission, it's in our core of today to come up with the solution and to make people ready for that and make ourselves ready as well.
Yeah, no, I think thanks for
story.
sharing that story, right? I mean, you see this around the world where when you don't take care of people, and it's not just about, like, of course, it's about empathy and taking care of them, but it affects everyone, meaning you cannot shield yourself if you live in a big city. And at the end of the day, if you don't take care of people, then, what's stopping them from blowing up everything, right? And so I think that's I think the most personal sort of example of why this is important.
Yeah. To me, this problem we're solving, right? Our big headline is peace of mind at scale, solving and ensuring that millions of people have access to great financial advice. It doesn't have to be only via human, right? We can also use AI to scale some of the part that an advisor nights on weekends, for example, can't or won't provide, right? But having access and then also executing and actually making that happen is very important. I think for me, this is personally extremely important. My dad was an underwriter until he retired, and also for friends, family, and small businesses around our small town or village. Basically, friends were visiting, and at the kitchen table we talked about insurance, right? I knew exactly very quickly what a car insurance was and what a private liability insurance was. And it really makes a difference, right? Because people, I grew up around Stuttgart area where many people, I always say, build cars or build machines that build cars. It's also an area right now that I think is a little bit under pressure. And yeah, this is people working hard, working shifts, saving, and then putting that either into real estate or insurance and finance to kind of protect what's important to them. And for me, this was something naturally. And then when you combine it with the low respect generally people give these advisors, it's generally for me a catalyst to say, no, this industry is much better than the public perception. This was also, I think, making it easy when I joined Clark as the first employee, because I knew I could always ask either him or my girlfriend, who also studied insurance distribution. So I brought some of her study books into Clark in the first days and just read through all of them. I think why Clark is still standing is that it has, and thriving, to my knowledge, is that the customer was always in the front and center. and the holistic advice and putting the advisor and the customer as smoothly in touch as possible and to make them available was, I think, the key differentiator. So looking how can we make it easy to scale the knowledge of the advisor, can we educate the customers, how we can make the advisors available at scale. I think the famous number is that a Clark advisor can advise 8 times more customers than other advisors in the industry with using technology. But I also learned that self-service is not the solution for everything, right? You need to find more scalable solutions to get this human touch, human knowledge, and I think specifically in the age of AI, also human empathy, and that I can put myself into your shoes and I can say, okay, Ritavan, I can imagine how this feels for you right now. I can imagine whether this is a credit or like a line of credit you want to take, whether that's too much for you or not, right? We all read Psychology of Money, so we know that what's economically rational is not always the thing that gets people to sleep well at night. And I think this is what also will be irreplaceable. And that's why I think the extreme customer obsession at Clark paid off. But I think also compared to other companies, I would say it's also a matter of execution. It's not enough, or it was not enough historically, to come up and say the insurance industry is huge. They're not using technology enough. This was like a claim that people made from the outside in. And we are a young and dynamic team and we can basically fix it. I think people were humbled very quickly because you also need to ruthlessly execute. And Clark had many people from Rocket Internet. Artem, you had many stations and learnings from Rocket. We are backed by Lucid Capital, like proudly backed. And so shout out to the team. And so we also believe that you need to bring the work ethic and you need to bring the execution. It's not only about being most creative. You also need to get the horsepower also on the street. And I think that's also part of the culture at today that we're trying to. We always say in a jokingly way, execution can be a moat.
Yeah, well, I think it totally is. And I think the motto and your sort of your goal and mission with peace of mind at scale, I think is really the right sort of thing to work towards. And speaking of Clark, I just since we've spoken so much about it and since I was kind of close to the company, but especially from a user's perspective, I felt it really solved the problem of doing insurance on the phone or on, whether it's in the app or whether it's speaking on the phone without having to physically go somewhere. That level of convenience was amazing and it was really helpful. What I feel now though is there's a certain, I think the expectation of personalization for users is much higher, right? And there I think there's like a wedge, a gap building. And I think that gap is something that is waiting to improve. To sort of flesh this out further, right? Be nice if you could speak about the problem of insurance, especially in Germany, in France, and in other European countries, but we have a geographical focus in this episode broadly. But I think it's similar in other countries with aging demographics, right? Whether it's Japan, whether, it'll be the US at some point, China has started aging too. And so this is, except for probably Africa, in India at some point will start aging too. So Africa, I think, has a very positive demographic trajectory now, but it's just the logic of time that at some point population starts aging and you can't do anything about it. So would you like to unpack the problem in a little greater detail to really explain why it's critical?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me put some pieces on the chessboard, I think, for this, right? So we have the governments who I would say generally are retreating, right? They basically, for example, Germany, I just heard a very renowned professor from the University of Cologne a couple of months back, and he basically said, well, the problem is people knew that care insurance in Germany would blow up in 2025, and this is now where we're seeing the cracks. They knew it like from the start because it's a transfer-based system, and you need a capital stock-based system that, for example, Denmark or the Nordics generally have in order to finance it from capital stock and not from current kind of workers. But the problem is the capital stock takes 30 years to build. So we have this challenge now. So that's, I think, the first piece. The government is retreating. And I see that more and more of the benefits that people have, insurance benefits, for example, pension, health insurance, disability to work, will come to the, like in the US a little bit, come from the employer. I think this is, there's a shift from the government to the employer underway. And we're seeing this with some of our, for example, today customers like Finzilla, who are doing a great job getting corporate pension into the hands of customers and making it very easy for companies to offer this. So that's, I think, the first part. The second part is when you look at an individual advisor, the incentives for them are a little bit broken, right? Because the customers at Clark, we distributed 23 types of private insurance. Many of them, for example, car insurance is a huge effort driver. You spend like 45 minutes to an hour, and in return, you earn 15 euros. from the insurance company baked into the commission. That's like the commission baked into the premium. That's not sufficient. So what we're seeing is some of the most innovative advisors are basically retreating from this and saying, hey, you also mentioned this in your book, Rita Van, Hook24, doing a tremendous job in car insurance. So they're sending their customers to direct insurers and say, hey, sorry, this is not, the system is set up in a way that this is not economical for me to do. Or some of them are actually now charging service fees and basically saying, hey, if you want me to scan this Leitsordner that you have in Germany with like 400 documents about your real estate, that's 800 euros because somebody needs to scan this, right? And I have an hourly rate. So this is what we have to do. And this is what we're currently seeing. Like people are fighting back against the incentive system that sometimes is broken, right? But when you then look at the daily schedule, and we're speaking to advisors every day, it can be like there was this recent study that created a lot of outrage in the industry. 1 out of 3 insurance brokers right now, there's 46,000 insurance brokers in Germany right now, 1 out of 3 is considering leaving the occupation because of regulatory effort. They spend too much time documenting. Is it IDD advisory documentation that today helps them now solve very efficiently with AI? Is it ESG preferences in investment? It's just a lot of manual effort. The data arrives from the insurance company coming out to the chess piece of the insurance company, oftentimes sending unstructured or incomplete data that needs to be processed so that the advisor can understand your insurance situation, what policies and claims and everything you had. And then that's basically the reality that the advisors, most of them are trapped in their business. They don't have enough time for the customers. They're doing over hours and are generally at times not very well compensated for what they do. On the insurance company side, they are modernizing rapidly. We talked about it as a legacy industry, right? There's lots of tech legacy, but it's improving radically, like the core insurance systems. But also you saw some very modern and forward-thinking insurance companies being pressured by the regulators to get their claims departments under order, because some years you have a lot of hail damage, for example, in Germany, and then you have a lot of like high claims volume. And if it takes a certain takes a certain duration, let's say 6 to 8 weeks until you hear from your insurance company, the regulator will come in and put you a little bit under pressure to be more efficient here. So they also have challenges in that area. But I think the biggest trend that overlays them all is the silver tsunami, right? The boomer generation is retiring, and there is knowledge that is lost. And essentially, you could make it very simple and say, okay, the average advisor is 52, 53. They will go soon into their well-deserved retirement, but it also means that their customers will have nobody to call. Now, and then the question is like, who's going to talk to them? Who's going to take care? Because people, even in pension, they have a lot of financial topics to think about. They think about inheritance, they think about investment, they think about real estate, they're thinking about care, they're thinking about, they still have claims, right? And that needs to be, they need to be served, they need to be engaged. While, as you also said, the average insurance customer has a higher threshold now. They want to have more personalization, they want to have 24/7 availability. And this is just something that I think a lot of advisors also struggle to provide. I think this is kind of the lay of the land as we see it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So now we can sort of move into like the 6-step structure of our discussion here. Let's start with save, right? So what are things that insurance agents and financial advisors, what are groupthink mistakes they're making? What are things they can, what are upfront things they should stop doing or could do differently to make their life better, right? So we'll focus the entire discussion around insurance agents and financial advisors and sort of see, what sort of, suggestions you have to make them better off. So what about, what should they save and stop doing just to save energy, capital, resources, whatever?
That's a very good question. Yeah. Artem, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, maybe I can start here because I have a really nice analogy to that in mind. Like, financial advisors, when they work with customers, they either do calls or they have offline meetings. This is how they actually bring value to their customers. This is how their most effective daily routine looks like. On top of that, they need to do a lot of preparation for every conversation, and they need to do a lot of work after the conversation. For example, documentation filling. Everybody hates filling documents after the conversation retrospectively, trying to remember what was discussed, what needs to be placed in what sort of fields and so on. And this documentation is huge. It's like, in some cases, it's not just the documentation to be shared between an advisor and their customers, but also the regulatory required documentation, which is, of course, the most complex one because it needs to follow certain standards. And this routine is, if I let me quote Garry Kasparov, the 13th chess world champion and currently a politician and a writer. I really respect himself for basically his chess career and his after chess career. And in his book, he used this interesting analogy that also fits to this situation. He said, good grandmasters, good chess players, they don't really think in moves and in combinations. They don't keep in mind endless number of possible positions that will happen on the chessboard after, let's say, 3 moves. They know exact position where they want to be in 10 moves or 20 moves. And this is what they think about. So they keep this position in mind. And how to achieve this position, this is already tactics. This is already tactics that you apply when the next move is done. And this is the same thing if we talk about advisors. They know the situation where they want to end with their customers. And how to achieve that is this exact routine that we help them to automate and free more time and more energy to work with customers during the calls, or not during the calls, but also on top of that when they try to find the best products or find the best solutions for customers. I would say this is one of the core things that we are automating, at least how I see it.
Yeah, and I think as you have more and more technology, what you see is that it's not like the human becomes less important. In fact, the human touch becomes more important, right? In the sense that you want, as a human, you want to be involved in speaking to other humans, right? In sort of having the empathy for them, personalizing and understanding their situation, and you don't want to be doing rote tasks, right? So I think that's sort of what's super clear here. Let's move on to leverage, because I think this is often underappreciated. Like, you don't have, like, a lot of people want to do a lot and sort of think, if I just put in more effort, things will work out. What I kind of advocate for is sort of finding the non-linearities, right? Finding your unfair advantages, finding those, you put in 20%, achieve 80% results kind of situations. And there are not a lot of them, but I think if you identify even one of them, right, you have a disproportionate impact compared to someone who's just playing the linear game. So in this context, what would you say are, highly leveraged opportunities for insurance agents and for financial advisors to achieve more with, less, and sort of also, sort of take their proprietary edge and win in a relatively,
Yeah, it's a super good question. And I don't have a definitive answer, but I can share basically stuff that I see working from the people we speak to every day. And they have some characteristics. So they specialize. So we're talking to people who only do insurance for tech workers, insurance advice for tech workers. We speak to folks who only do financial empowerment for women, which is super important. And they basically built a specialization and a brand around it. And they structured a whole advisory approaches around this. And this is what we also support with Today Templates. In Today Templates, you can define your advisory approach, and we help you coach and get you coaching insights for every consultation you do. So you and your team follow this precisely, right? So you capture your wedge in the market and say, I want to be the best in advising tech workers. And then you structure your whole advisory approach, your whole customer journey around this. You take special care about the products and tax benefits that you can offer, and then you roll this out across your whole team and whole organization. Because what also we observed is basically the best and most successful advisors, they have an immense level of routine, and they are able to systematically pull off the same advisory approach with little deviation 5 to 7 times a day. And then you can really scale because you have built yourself a system. You are very efficient with today documentation, for example, today's summaries, today data extraction. You can basically populate your CRM very efficiently. Then you kind of have your wedge, and then basically they just built a nice go-to-market machine for them. They build personal brands around this. They engage and build communities around this. They have SEO assets sometimes so that people can find them very easily. And then they just have a great operational advisory process and machine behind it so that they are very efficient and great at what they do. And then, of course, they obsess about optimizing this playbook. So they obsess, and this is what we also help them with, finding out what are the cross-sell opportunities, what are the wordings, what are the objections that really make them successful so that when they have a new advisor, they can easily scale them up and get them up to speed and grow their team very efficiently. So I think that is basically what I've seen working for many different of our customers.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the specialization, I guess, geographically becomes important, but also by sort of community in a broader sense. I saw a lot of posts on LinkedIn that came up on my feed from a financial advisor who picked Indian expats as his specialty. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I called him up. I was curious to understand, what got him interested. And he'd grown up in the Soviet Union. So he has absolutely it's not like it's an Indian guy trying to sell to Indian people. This was someone, who saw the opportunity. He ran through the numbers. He said, okay, these guys are earning disproportionately more, right? They're coming in highly skilled jobs, etc. So he had an entire thesis. The smart thing, as you said, is then the content strategy, the outreach, the differentiation, all of that is then driven by that one thesis. And so you can then speak about issues that someone else might not even know. So things like, how do expats from this region invest, right? What kind of family issues do they run into, etc. And so I think when you go that deep, that's when you really let the human element shine, and then you engage with your customer where they are, right, with the problems they face, and not some kind of generic, best practice, copy paste kind of version of things.
Absolutely. We also have, as you said, anecdotally, we have also an example where for a Southern Germany pension advisor, they're doing corporate pension, and they had companies that has a lot of people from India and Pakistan working in the engineering teams, basically. And they were looking for a solution that they can provide them multilingually, right? So we were building them basically a way to explain their product universe in also in Hindi, like in English and German and Hindi, so that people can also advise on a high level of quality without speaking the language. And I think that's how you use AI in a valuable way. Yeah? You double down on your niche, you understand who you want to serve, and then you're using technology to be more accessible. I would actually even say the geographic specialization. It's an interesting part because we have customers that basically said, okay, Corona, for me, the COVID time, there was the eureka moment to understand I can serve people across Europe. I can actually serve people across Europe because I can internationalize. I can just build. If I'm the best insurance advisor for people with horses or people who do fighting sports, I can do this for whole Germany, right? And they basically understood and leveraged this moment. But also we're seeing advisors that are extremely successfully in their regions, who are doing sponsorship deals with the local sports clubs and who achieve crazy good results based on a very strong local presence, a very strong local understanding, and then building extremely strong local hubs. And I think if you're caught in the middle of that, you're not in a great position. So I think both extremes are the future, either hyperlocal or serving a whole country, basically. But if you're stuck in the middle, I think that's another smart positioning. So I would advise everybody to re-explore one of those two.
Yeah, and I think differentiation is so important because, automation gets you to level up, but differentiation is what helps you win in a competitive market, right? Artem, do you have a story to share? I guess you also kind of started out probably your journey as an expat like me. And do you have a personal anecdote to share? Or otherwise, we can move to the next step on a line. I just wanted to check if you had something on this.
Yeah, it's basically, as you also experience when you come to the new country, you have a fresh view on everything what is happening. And this is also like one of our strengths comparing to locals here, because they were born in this environment. They used to live their entire life in this environment. And for us, when we come to it, we experience everything in a completely different way. Because like starting from very basic thing that to rent an apartment, you need a bank account. And to open a bank account, you need a signed contract for the apartment. So starting from these very tiny things to getting also personal insurance, very basic insurance might be challenging indeed. And as Michael said, what we are doing also on multiple languages, and even not just multiple languages, but in some of our features, we are also planning to use dialects, for example, local dialects like Bavarian dialect, or we also have some customers in Brazil, and for them, we use the local version of Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, not the traditional main Portuguese, and stuff like that. So I think this is really important, especially for people with the immigration history.
Yeah, I think we all have that, right? Michael's been living in Denmark for many years, even though he was born and brought up in Germany. And so I think you develop a certain level of empathy if you're open-minded, and it helps you see things differently. So people seeing things differently and having their own experiences means you want to achieve, when you're working together in a team, you want to achieve alignment, right? And so if you are a financial advisor and you're working solo, that's one thing. At that point, you want to still align yourself, 20 moves ahead, as you said, Artem, right? From Gary Kasparov. You don't want to be just stuck in the next step in your, finishing your to-do list. You want to work towards something. But more importantly, as you get more and more people into your team, you want to make sure the different people are aligned. And so what metrics, right, should insurance agents and financial advisors use to align the value they deliver to customers? And what role do you play to help them achieve this alignment with today?
Yeah, this is I think one of the hottest and most contested issues, because the insurance industry in general is, specifically the advisors, are extremely vocal about how good looks like. So we as today, we have taken a very flexible approach to say, if you have an idea how good looks like, we help you accomplish that. We are not normative. We're not telling you how you should talk to your customers. We basically ideally start and workshop together how you can make your customers happy. And I think that's a function of, I think, long-term customer value. I think that's probably the best one. So if we have a framework for risk, if you as an advisor have a framework for risk assessment where you uncover certain risk and opportunities, let's say pension, let's say P&C insurance, let's say disability to work, executing on those opportunities, informing the customers, getting them to a right decision point, and then if they have the budget and the willingness to actually get them to execute on those, I think that is fundamentally what I would see. If you then take this customer long-term value perspective, where you say this is something that, it's not just a contract that you close and then after 2 years they switch it again and are unhappy with the choices. But if you look at a 5 to 8 year customer lifetime value, I think this would be a very good metric, because it ties into retention. It also ties into, are you doing your good job on P&C? If somebody has a claim, can you also help them serve it? Do you annually check up and understand if life risk has changed? I think that's kind of what I would see as kind of ideally a good part, and I think it all pays into a CLV. But of course, this industry has widely different incentives and business models. So there will be people who optimize for short term, and there will be people who might approach a customer's portfolio or contract and try to badmouth it. But on the other side, what we're trying to do with today is we also try to workshop together how good advice looks like and help people achieve that. But we're also looking at ways how we can give advisors a really good chance to look good during the consultation, which means there will be a feature that we're launching, which is can announce it right now, but I think our competition will not catch us until we have it. We want to help people with situational factual knowledge. So if I have a question, I'm in a consultation with a customer, they have a tricky tax question. I don't want to fire off a Google search. I know exactly where and who in this industry has thought most deeply about it. And we want to make their knowledge available in today situationally, so that if I have a question, I will get, without 15 to 20 seconds, I will get an answer without having to say, okay, Ritavan, that's a very good question. Let me note it down. Let me get back to you. Let's have another meeting on this one, right? I want to have the almost real-time knowledge for this. And I'm not trying to set our engineering team under pressure, but this is something that we definitely want to launch this year, because we believe that advisors deserve the best situational assist there is, without, as I said, having a normative idea how perfect looks like, because there are many of those initiatives and they look different for holistic advice. They look different for individual categories of insurance and pension and investing. And therefore, I believe the common ground is mostly there are some categories of insurance and pension investing that people are, let's say, less excited about, but they are very important. Let's go back to the care insurance example. Care inflation is at 5% a year. A care insurance place in Germany costs right now 3,000 euros. This is a topic that you should have on your list, right? I think, but apart from that, I think today does not have a normative approach as to how and in which sequence a certain insurance topic should be discussed.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, right? You can't really, I mean, you shouldn't and you can't have it. That was the point of, having individual humans doing what they believe in best if you have a normative approach. But what you say is so important because I think there are certain kind of roles where you know exactly why you're talking to the person, right? I don't know, like if you're getting your car checked by a mechanic, you will speak about the car. You are unlikely to speak about a whole bunch of things unless you know them well. With a financial advisor, it's somehow different, right? Because money, happiness, life philosophy, like all these things kind of are so closely intertwined because money in itself is meaningless, right? So like money is in a context of living, of life, of happiness, etc., and all the other goals that are associated with money. And so what happens very often is when you speak to your financial advisor, you start asking all kinds of questions that are not directly linked to financial advice. And this kind of came up yesterday actually when I was recording on the Talking Billions podcast with Bogumil Baranovsky, and like he advises wealthy families about generational wealth. And so in that context, people will ask you any question they have. Then you want to be in a place where you can give them value on those questions. It's because it's precisely these, let's say, almost off-topic questions that help build trust, that help two humans sort of realize that they're aligned, right? That they're aligned
Yes.
on their philosophy about life, money, and happiness. And so I think it's great that you're adding all that to the product because this will really help build trust. Because initially, you're selling whatever the financial product or insurance is, or you're kind of, recommending it. In the future, trust is going to sell, right? Like you.
Absolutely.
And so you really want to build that trust. And so if I were to think of a North Star metric for insurance agents and for financial advisors, it's really trust. And then the question is, how can you even try to quantify it? How should you go about doing it, etc.?
Yeah, it can also be referrals. Referrals are also good metric in that regard. But like maybe let me double down on this, because one of the things we also learned when we were working with our design partners in the very first months is that some of the best advisors who now actually codified their approaches in Today templates, and it's freely available to people in the Today app. So you can basically in Today hop on a best practice template, for example, for an annual checkup that is the forged insight of top advisors from 8,000 conversations that they had, right? And then they formalized it into approach and made it available in Today for free. And we reward those creators for everybody who's using their templates, right? But what we learned from that is precisely what you said. The best advisors, they start with, okay, Ritavan, what does actually pension mean for you? Like, walk me through what you're going to do there. Can we actually draw a picture together? Can we actually go to like Getty or Getty Images? Can we find an image that represents this for you? Because when we talk to people who are responsible for either digital distribution, digital sales, and CROs in banks, insurance companies, pension companies, they basically all tell us the same things. They're basically saying, we all have experts, but we need more people who are commercially better. And then when we ask them, what do they mean with that? Like, what does it mean? Then it's exactly that. It's like somebody who can understand a person deeply, has a broad emotional intelligence, understands the motives, and can draw a picture, like a shared vision. And then from that derive, okay, how are we going to get there? What's your magic number? What is your risk profile? What avenues, what basically of the tools that I have available for you will be the best instruments to getting you there. And I think that's hugely underestimated. Many people are basically more like, okay, Ritavan, I have this list for you, car insurance, home insurance. And then if we have some money left, we think about the pension, right? But it should start the other way around, I think, with a deep understanding of the person you have opposite of you and trying to chart a path for them. So that's why I would say the role of the financial advisor is also shifting from, especially now that I would say every third customer already comes with ChatGPT informed into the advisory. So the subject level expertise is kind of narrowing. There's not as much as a gap anymore. It's not about explaining the product so much or the product categories. It's more about the emotional capacity now needs to be very high so that you also understand, okay, how do I approach this person? How do we find a common denominator and common path and a shared vision? And then you are basically the life guide who says, okay, Ritavan, no worries. You're new to Germany? Great. I have had 50 customers who had the same problem. This is how you think about it. Okay, Artem, you want to start a business? No worries. I have 5 customers. This is how they thought about it. Or you want to buy a house? No worries. We get this done, right? Because you can transfer life experience from other customers to your customer. I think that's kind of a capacity that will be much more in demand.
Yeah, I think life experience is really the word here, and it's sort of tacit knowledge, right? Like you need to be a sink in a good way. You need to take all that tacit knowledge, centralize it, and then personalize it and deliver it back. And you also
Correct.
need a certain level of depth, reflection, and almost you need to be a mini closet philosopher, I feel, right? Because when you're talking about money, you're talking about life, you're talking about meaning, you're talking about happiness, you're talking about very, very deep concepts, right? They're all so I think that is where it's going, and in a really interesting way. It's probably the best time to become a financial advisor, because if you are someone who likes to read, to think, to feel deeply, to connect, right, that's exactly the stuff that's going to help you win in the market today. It's
I think
not
as well.
about right. It's not about just, oh, you bought insurance A, let me sell you insurance B.
Correct.
You have recommender systems for these, right? You don't need a human being. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think this is an amazing opportunity.
I agree.
Exactly.
And curiosity is the master skill, right? If you're curious about people, that I think will become a key ingredient as well. Sorry, Artem.
Yeah, exactly. Communication is still the key. So there is no difference either it's in the world without AI or in the modern world where we have AI, where we have super strong LLMs and so on. The core is still the first conversation between a customer and an advisor. And with the help of AI, of course, we can move it further because we have a transcript. We know what happened there. And on top of that transcript, we can improve the number of services that advisors can offer to customers and the variety of that and so on and so on. But the first conversation still need to happen, and it needs to be very trustworthy, no doubt. And yeah, that's still the key.
Yeah, and I would even say, before the first conversation, the trust that gets built is based on, what you stand for. And you see that in investing, right? Whether it's a Warren Buffett, a Charlie Munger, a Guy Spear, a Monish Pabra, etc. Like you see that in the tradition of investing, each of these might not be necessarily the best investor ever, right? There might be people, I don't know, doing high frequency trading somewhere who might have more money, who might be billionaires, who might have extracted more money from the system, but people don't look up to them. People don't want to learn from them. People are not drawn to them. And I think as a financial advisor in that sense, it's so much more about like what you stand for, what you believe in, your tacit knowledge, your experiential knowledge, right? How you give meaning to money, to risk, to life, etc. And so I think that is really fascinating. And I think this is something that will just keep growing.
Totally agree. And people say or have been saying that Warren Buffett is one of the best content marketers on the planet with the shareholder
100%.
letters, right? So I believe this as well.
Yeah, or even a Jeff Bezos, right? Like when you go contrarian in a market and you write these letters, not everyone's going to like your quarterly earnings, but you're not anyway speaking to those people. You're speaking to the ones who are going to play the long game with you, right?
Yes.
And in some ways, I think as a successful financial advisor, you want to have a clear, personal, you want to leverage your unique unfair advantage, which is your lived life experience, right? Your learnings, your tacit knowledge. And then you want to position yourself in a market and say, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. And that itself is a bit like a filter, right? It will draw certain kind of people to you and also make it clear to other people that it's not a fit for them, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the more you double down on that, the more you will enjoy your life and your work, but you'll also, bring value to other people.
Yes. And I think coming back, that interestingly circles back to what you asked earlier about what happened with InsurTech. I think the people who are still in the game are the ones who are long-term insurance, like they are long insurance, right? They basically say, this is something I care about, and I will be in this industry for a long time, and the tourists have left InsurTech, let's put it that way. Yeah. But the ones who say this is long-term, an opportunity where I have a deep empathy for the industry, for the customer, and the technology, and I can really make an impact. Those are the ones I would see that occasionally or basically we see double down, right? There's new groups and new entities forming. There is Ascendia, which is super exciting. There is Loyago, to name a few. I think the people at Feather are also doing a tremendously good job. So I think, it's super exciting what's happening. And you see the people who are long-term committed to the industry and the people who pivot away from it.
That's such an interesting point, actually. The more I think about it, I think the more you see that among Clarkies broadly, ex-Clarkies too. Like, the leadership team at Clark and a lot of people there, these are people who fell mad in love with insurance at very young ages. Like I think Daniel was at 12, Marco at 15. You have a link to insurance, Michael. And so I think you just see clearly that, if you have people who are passionate about the industry, who've been at it for a while and who want to do insurance all their life, a company with that kind of talent, I think, will just outlast any ups and downs. While, if you're just opportunistically moving from industry to industry just because you think you can make a quick buck, even in the VC game, which is about making, about scaling fast, etc., though, that kind of company will not last just because the talent will move away, the sense of mission will go away.
I agree.
So yeah, given that Artem's also done a lot of fintech, I think you guys are, you kind of had a really good kind of founding combo here, co-founder combo. But
Absolutely.
But before we just get carried away in this moment we're having, let's move on to the next step, right, which is simplify. And this is, I think, this is especially important for the insurance industry because insurance is a complex product, right, by design. Not every insurance, but most insurance products are relatively complex. And financial, investment products, etc., are also relatively complex. And so in a setting where complexity is the product in some ways, then there is a lot of friction due to that, right? Because the barrier to a customer understanding the product is much higher. And so what can insurance agents and financial advisors do to proactively reduce this complexity, right? And of course, you cannot make the product simpler, but like the way you position the product, the way you explain the product in the context of the goals of the customer, the lived experience of the customer, etc. Right? I think those things become important. So how do you see today helping financial advisors and insurance agents sort of simplify things in a very proactive way?
Yeah. So I think very, very good question. I think what we're seeing is, you're right, the products are complicated, so your workflows shouldn't be, right? So your work, like how you organize your day, should be as frictionless as possible. And I think one advisor we spoke to last week basically said it in a wonderful way. Like he basically said, well, with today, if I have a note taker or our desktop app, like if I have my meetings transcribed and afterwards summarized and documented and coached and so forth, he just basically said, I have the wonderful feeling that I can fully focus on the customer. So the first part, as we said, for building trust and for not missing, actually, one of the important risks to be like awake and present and everything is to have low cognitive load, right? But if I say, hey, Ritavan, we have an annual checkup. We spoke maybe a year ago, maybe 8 months. And I say, what has changed? And you tell me, okay, we bought a horse. We have a new car. I have a new kid. This is something that I need now to think about. Okay, wait a moment. We have 23 types of insurance that we can offer. Maybe you have 3, 4 contracts already with us. Which ones do we need to adjust? Which ones do we need to cancel? Which ones do we need to add? Sometimes I'm structuring in just 2-3 minutes, cognitive structuring 4 to 5 hours of future consultation, right? This is load, and this is also where basically the magic happens and basically where insurance advisors shine, right? If you then say, no worries, I'm present, I have a safety net, this is all going to be recorded, this is all going to be transcribed, this is all going to be analyzed for you. You have basically the security that you will get a super good documentation and summary afterwards, but also you know that nothing is forgotten, right? And today is so accurate, it's basically even sometimes people talk about the name of their cat and we pick it up in the transcripts, right? So this is where we really shine. And I think that's the first step. The second is clearly, as we said before, have a structured advisory approach, right? Know what you're going to talk about in the first meeting, in the second and third. Know what are your cross-selling opportunities, know what your objections are and how you educate the customer in the perfect way and template it and roll it out to all of your team and coach them specifically so that it's always delivered in the way that you want, and continuously also optimize this playbook. I think those are the parts that immediately come to mind. Of course, we also, with today's simulations, our AI role play engine, we also help onboard new advisors very quickly to let them practice with some customer conversations. So if I say, okay, this conversation with Ritavan went really difficult, he challenged me really on some aspects, I can just replay it. I can just I always say, put a new free kick, could put a new ball to the free kick and practice 5 free kicks basically before the next customer, and I can already make the learnings for myself. I think those are the ones that I see. Of course, there are some parts that advisors are doing that currently happen outside today. For example, they will send a Loom or a video ahead of the meeting to say, hey, Ritavan, we're going to talk about pension. Here's a little bit like a video or like a small explanation of what we're going to talk about. So you have a preparation. So they scale the advice in that ways as well. And then, of course, it's also basically having a very succinct and valuable summary to send to the customer so that everything is captured and they learn from after the conversation. And then it's about, I think, an area that, for example, I think Marco Adelt at Loyago is doing a great job, re-engagement, right? It's like, how do I find And that's also where today really, really shines. We extract from every conversation between 10 and 30 data points that are hyper-personalized, that are relevant for you, that you can customize. Because I always say, if you don't know anything about your customers, you send them a Black Friday campaign, right? And say, hey, Rita, when's Black Friday? Do you want to have a private liability insurance, right? But if you know your customers deeply and say, no, he's actually saving for a house in Sweden. He's a huge VfB Stuttgart fan, for example, and he's like, maybe he wants to just buy a season pass next year, right? Those are things that really build strong connections. And today is a great way to capture those data points so that you actually have something to say in your re-engagement campaigns, right? And this is something in an industry where only 15% of the insurance companies have the email address of their customers. You can imagine how valuable this is.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like getting the contact details, right? The online sort of contact details is step one. But I think you can sort of build a higher dimensional understanding of a user, of a customer through text that you couldn't do before, right?
Yeah.
And I think that takes kind of the opportunity of personalization to another level. I think the regulatory aspect, or let's say the workflow aspect, should not be underestimated. When I was CTO at a home equity, at Germany's leading home equity release provider, we had a situation where an older client thought they were told something or were not sure, or had a certain belief about what happened during the consultation, and then later on, wanted to kind of say that something wasn't done as it was supposed to, etc. And in those situations, when it's all documented, when you have a transcript, when you have these kind of boxes that get checked, because for certain products you have regulatory requirements of going through the aspects of the product that the customer needs to know. And I think the more you simplify that user flow, the more trust you build, because at the end, you can send that summary to the customer too, and then they know that these topics were explained. And if they didn't understand it, they can get back and say, hey, yes, you might have spoken about it, but it's not clear for me. Can we do another session, right? Can we unpack this in greater detail? And I think all of this helps build trust. Yeah, it's not just about sort of covering your ass and saying, look, I'm safe, etc. But it's really about making sure the customer feels like they have, all their questions have been answered.
Absolutely. Yeah, not to be underestimated. I recently met a group of young brokers who all are very successful in their advisory approaches. But what we then discussed was a case where actually a customer had a previous advisor, then switched advisors and forwarded kind of the whole email history, and they rediscussed some of the previous, let's say, assessments. And it turned out that the first advisor made a mistake and the second advisor didn't capture it because it was not part of the final documentation. And what happened basically is that this customer understood something differently, and it was basically a loophole, a legal loophole that opened up. So she actually sued the second advisor for a mistake that the first advisor did, where she felt it was unclear. And actually it resulted in a high, I think 5-figure settlement that the second advisor needed to do. So this is actually something that's extremely important. And to be honest, like most advisors I speak to say they're not comfortable with the way they're currently documenting. They're basically saying, yeah, we're doing the bare minimum, or we should do better, we should do more. So this is actually something where I believe we can really have an impact and just save something. It's, I think, even more difficult in SME insurance, where it's much more non-standard business. But even in the retail advice, this is just something where regulation, people are basically calling for a moratorium and say, hey, can we just stop introducing new regulation and get this sorted, get this more efficient, and then we can from there, have a clean start, because the industry is, I think, currently at its limits, what is done. And yeah, it's basically something that I believe is just a bit of too much red tape at times, it seems.
Yeah, but I mean, pick your demographic, you're going to always have this nuance in communication, right? As Artem was also saying, like when someone says something and someone else listens to it, that communication might not be the same for both sides. There'll be some kind of asymmetry. And whether it's young people you're speaking to, right? So like people who are just graduating high school, I mean, we're not that old, but there is already like, a decent gap, and the kind of lingo they use, the kind of terms they're familiar with, all of that has changed dramatically. Whether you look at expats coming from around the world, working in the economy across different sectors, everyone comes with their own sort of lived experience and context, which is different. Whether you look at people retiring, right, or with age, memory getting fading away and things like that. These are all issues that you have to find better ways of solving, documenting, and ensuring alignment. Right at the end, it's
Yes.
about, and which kind of brings us to the next step, which is optimize. Right, which is what happens very often is people do what is good enough. Right, let's just do what's good enough, and then we move on. And I think that's the enemy of really delighting especially in a customer facing role. Right, like you want to delight the customer, because it's not just about ticking boxes, about getting quote unquote a job done. It's about making the customer feel special, making them feel happy, making them feel like this was worth it. Optimizing, cultivating first an empirically valid view of the world, and then optimizing that through superior decision making, I think is so important. And so, how do you see that from your perspective? And how does today help financial advisors sort of achieve that?
Yeah, here we can refer to what we just discussed in the previous topic with when there is not just one conversation, not only one call between an advisor and the customer, but a series of them. And it happens very often, especially if an advisor involves other advisors who have more experience in a certain area and bring them to one of the next conversations. We recently had one request from one of our customers to generate them not just meeting notes after every call, but a full documentation after a series of such calls with the same customers, but when multiple advisors are involved. And we can imagine exactly if things like that done manually, it's very easy to forget what happened 5-6 calls ago and who said what. But with our product, with the automation, when we have all the transcripts, when we have all the meeting notes, it becomes much more efficient for both sides, because advisors don't need to remember and get back to pieces of paper what was discussed, who said what, and so on. But it's also important for customers because they get much more complete information. Nothing will be missed, nothing will be hidden as well. So they will get a full transparent document with the full retrospective what was discussed, and also with the offers that are based on this series of discussions. And this is something that is common. This is something that we are building.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said, right, if you imagine a typical advisor's week, let's say 5 to 15 customer conversations, like if they have a full calendar and it's year-end business and people want to like get some lock-in, some tax benefits or something like that. Good enough is basically, as you said, right, you have the conversations, you hopefully prepare them. Sometimes you don't. And our perfect memory kind of helps you do that in a better way. But sometimes you just run through it. At the end of the day, you have a list of to-dos. And what we hear from our customers is mostly like, okay, like before today, I knew the big ones, I knew the big to-dos, but some of the smaller tasks probably fell through the cracks. And then you get an email 2 months later. It's like, hey, did you actually get this home insurance done for me? And then they're like, oh my God. And this is kind of what currently good enough, I think, looks like. Things fall through the crack and you're just trying to react on the most important things. But I think where we help is mostly the perfect memory, letting down your guards and being really awake and present for the customers. I think that is when you play offense, where you can really hyper-personalize, where you can, with a situational assist, really convince and engage and tell a captivating story. I think that is something that is not to be underestimated. And as Artem said, there will be situations where today will, for example, prepare a cross-sell for you and delivers to you at the right time so you don't have to do the work. I think this is where also our templates help you run to the best practice for a pension consultation, for a health insurance consultation. We will basically offer you templates of the best-in-class advisors that you can basically hop onto, so that you don't have to, when you start as a new advisor, you don't have to spend so much time setting up your CRM, setting up your advisory approaches, setting up your processes. We try to lift the status quo with our templates, for example, and with the way it's working. But yeah, as we said, without imposing any specific way, it's just an option that you can hop on. Yeah. So
in some ways, I think you're helping transfer experiential and tacit knowledge from a generation of advisors that's going to retire to a new one that's entering, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the
And I mean,
legal,
like, really, we can only just like thank those advisors like Robert Polkert from Lieblingsmakler. It's absolutely incredible. He's a book author, a podcast host. He has codified the learnings from 8,000 insurance advisory consultations into 2 playbooks that are now available in today. It's the perfect annual checkup and the perfect pension consultation. And this is really like dropping and kind of, turning every stone to see, okay, what is the best option for you? Is it like one of the 3 pillars of the pension system? Is it precious metals and gold? Is it any other asset classes that could be a good fit for you? And really like going deep and making a really like solid job. And I think that's invaluable that creators on today share their hard-earned lessons with everybody to use. Imagine you start now your business and you just hop on the best possible templates. You're already on a top 80% scale compared to everybody else who's trying to kind of come up and codify and optimize their approaches from scratch. I think it's hard to overstate how important this is and how good work advisors like Robert are doing.
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap this up, but also to build on everything we've discussed, it's so important to not constrain the way you see opportunities based on what was available today, right? Meaning, and no pun intended, but like with today, you're kind of opening up a whole bunch of opportunities, a whole different way of doing things, right? Where you were, your humanness sort of as a financial advisor, and also the humanness of the customer becomes more important, because the technology kind of takes care of a lot of the routine stuff, but also helps you and get insight. So what's the mindset change in terms of, embracing abundance of opportunity, of doing things better, that you would want to tell, financial advisors and insurance agents? How do you get people to embrace this abundance mindset? Because I think that the range of possibilities has just grown phenomenally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched upon this a little bit with the COVID phenomenon, where people basically said, I'm not a Stuttgart-based advisor, I'm a Germany-oriented advisor, where I'm not a one-size-fits-all advisor, but I'm a specialist. I think that's also something. But also, like, when you just think about, okay, with today, for example, I have a perfect memory. I will never forget anything, right? Then that really allows to not play defense, and you're kind of trapped in your week to week schedule. You just like try to like go home earlier, go back to your family, but you're not, because you're kind of calculating quotes, you're filling out documentation. Sometimes the ratio is as bad as like 1 hour of health insurance advice results in 3 hours of admin work until the application is really done. I think that is something where there's a leverage, and you can play this and say, basically, no, wait a moment, can use AI tools like today, but also maybe other systems, to rethink how my business works. And my personal advice to advisors is always like, please take 30 minutes or an hour once a week. Look at your calendar. Like, look at all the processes and really log every 15 minutes what you did. And then go with a green pen and just like circle the stuff where you want to grow and where you say, oh, I could have done more things here. And with red, circle the administrative processes, like what cost you time, what was annoying to you, what was an email that shouldn't have been sent. And then just like step by step, look at what can I do to shrink those red pieces and grow those green ones, right? So where could I have been better? But it also requires that you actually have a little bit of structured processes and the freedom a little bit to have this hour. But I think many of the advisors have and now taken the time, because frankly, I think there is a lot of software in the insurance industry, but the current systems are, some people say, like data graveyard, like they don't log in, they're not sales oriented, they're more like document management systems. So they are perfect for orchestrating accounts and contracts and policies and claims. And maybe also like quoting engines are also abundant. But few tools have actually helped really like free up more headspace and to play, as we call it, play offense. Be proactive with your customers, build deep relationships, engage them. And we're trying to be one of those that help you actually win. So yeah, this is something where I think there was a bit of a mindset shift on the advisor side that is currently not met from the industry. We see this, for example, in some advisors who built their full stack not on a traditional broker management system, but on Pipedrive. Some are using Soho CRM, some are using HubSpot. Sometimes in combination with the traditional broker management systems, but some people are just like building their own worlds on Zoho, for example. And of course, we're looking very closely which systems are most popular with our advisors, so we can forge integrations and make sure all of your insights and tasks land in those systems. But there's definitely a mindset shift underway.
Nice.
I think into that, just a tiny addition, I think the preparation mindset is going to be changed dramatically as well. With our simulations, conversational simulations, and practicing, as Michael said before, advisors can do what they've never been able to do before. Practice a real conversation like it's a real customer, and specifically practice the most complicated situations. we all know when we do important pitches or presentations, we sometimes do preparational like rehearsals in front of friends and family. And this is what financial advisors could not have done before, because like you want what you pitch to every single customers, to your friends and family, because simply there is no time for that. Now with the rise of technology and what we offer as simulational practicing, they can do it very easily like this anytime they want, and they don't need hours. It's sometimes 5 to 10 minutes is just enough to practice something really complicated and get a feedback from the system that behaves like a real customer.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that you say this, Artem, because we just had this last week where a customer said, wait a moment, there was this one call where one of my advisors, he spoke extremely fast, like the talk ratio and the talk speed was off the charts. And then he looked into the call in today, and it was like, okay, it was a very high net worth individual. Like it was a very, they called it like a millionaire customer. So it was a very demanding customer with very high standards and very high expectations. So of course the advisor was nervous. It's 100% normal, right? So we're also speaking, for example, to structured distribution organizations who spend up to 4 to 5 hours per week per advisor, where the leader and the advisor sit together and role play in the office, right? Imagine how much demand and how much strain is on the leaders to be there for their customers, for their advisors to really make this time and be available to practice, right? And now with AI simulations, where we hear in the voices, right? We hear in the advisors' voices how challenged they are, because the AI will basically say something like, "Okay, Ritavan, you're saying you're calling me from insurance company ABC, but how can I make sure that you're not a scam?" And then you hear it in the advisor's voice. They are like certainly challenged in this moment, and they're like, okay, you see it in the face and you hear it in the brain that the advisor is currently cognitively thinking, why am I justifying myself to an AI? But on a human level, we can't do otherwise. We are basically like, okay, it's a valid question. I'm under pressure. I need to respond. I need to explain myself. And you really hear it, because in the first 5 seconds, they're like, yeah, I'm doing my normal thing and like, is this working? And then the AI says something unexpected, and you're really challenged in the situation, and you really need to work, right? They're sweating, they're working, they're convincing. And this is actually what you want to do. But currently the situation or the status quo is just like millions of person hours being spent on this, millions of people, millions of manual role play to get people ready and to help them deliver a great experience. Yeah, AI is just such a nice scalable solution for this. So I think we're very happy to work with some of the most innovative advisors on this together.
Yeah, and if I take other roles, right, whether it's pilots, doctors, they're spending hours kind of perfecting their craft, right, before they go out into the wild. And why should it be different for other professions? And I think what I kind of also argue in my writing and book and my work is that, technology kind of raises the bar for everyone, right? It will not help you win in your market. That's the differentiation you bring as a human, right? And where you need to counter position, where you need a contrarian take on your market, right? You need your unique sort of proprietary take of how you want to win. That's your winning strategy, right? But technology just raises the bar for everyone. And I think with today, you're kind of bringing the level of professionalism that pilots, that doctors, that others have, to financial advisors. And I really love the tagline, the motto, peace at scale, peace of mind at scale. And so, yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the pod. It was a very interesting discussion. I think a very nice follow on from the second episode we had with Marco Adelt and Daniel Klaraman. So thanks, Michael, and thanks, Artem, and I wish you a lot of luck. And I'm excited to see what you build over the next years.
Thanks, Ritavan, for having us. And I can just recommend, this is in our company library. So yeah, feel free to check it out, read it. I have a lot of notes and a lot of underlines in the book. And I believe it will be same for many of other operators and founders.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ritavan.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe on slasog.substack.com and on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts. See you on the next episode.